This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Wow, we've got matching swag on today, except the yin and the yang. I love
look
it.
At that, light and dark. It's let's see if the attitudes match.
I'm going to lighten you up. For those who nobody was watching before we got on here, I was accusing you of being a little dark today. Yes.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm wearing the light shirt. I'm trying to balance it out. You know what I'm saying? But it's all engine vision, so it's all good.
I was really noticing some. Maybe I was overreacting, but I was noticing some dark clouds over the GPS attitude today.
Well, that's why I got the light here. You know, if I cover the light, maybe it gets even darker. But we're good to go. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm wonderful. It's been a great day and a great week, so all is good. Who's not so wonderful is the mayor of New York. How's that for a curveball to you after everything we've talked about?
That's the best when Mark spends the whole morning sending me stories, and then within 90 seconds of the show starting, he brings up one that hasn't been broached. It's great. It's good times.
Well, for those who don't know, I say, and then also there's a true test of one of your best skill sets. You know, I don't think people quite understand your ability to extemporaneously do the kinds of things that you do when I'm just, in fact, it's interesting because I used to say I had a partner for many years and he was brilliant, Pat Harris. And Pat was brilliant at when I would be doing a cross-examination in a courtroom, he could hand me, he just knew where I was. He could read my mind and would hand me stuff right mid-cross that was just like the coup de grace. I mean, It was brilliant that way.
Totally.
And then Sitara, who has worked with me for a decade, she's gotten on to that. And Margot has that kind of ability. And now I've noticed that you have that same ability when I'm riffing to be able to come up with something. So,
and you know what I get from the audience for that? What's wrong with his eyes? I'm trying to search through 15 different things while he's talking. I can't look at the camera. I got to look at the computer screen. I get it. My eyes don't always look great on camera, but it's because I'm trying to juggle 6 balls in the air and listen to the conversation and be able to contribute. So we'll figure it out. But Eric Adams, he needs a cell phone if anyone has one that they can borrow.
You want to give this is a true also test of your ability to riff. Why don't you give the story? Then I'll give you my take on it.
Yeah. So Eric Adams had his phone and his iPad, I believe, seized by the FBI. And they're saying it's to investigate potential ties to Turkey when it comes to campaign donations and, developing story. But that's those are the nuts and bolts so far.
Right. And his campaign was saying that somebody in his orbit, and everybody's speculating that it was a 25-year-old woman named Suggs, who's his campaign person, whose house was already searched, that did something untoward and that he's cooperating and things of that nature. For those who are frequent watchers or longtime watchers, they will know what perked my interest in this case was, why is Turkey and Azerbaijan care about the mayor of New York? Does anybody ask that question? Because aside from the fact that campaign contributions are, the allegation at least is, if you look at what's transpired so far, and there was a story about the mayor going to Washington, D.C. to meet with Biden to talk about the migrant crisis. Everybody was talking about, the kind of chattering on Twitter was, well, he was going to talk about the migrant crisis, so the DOJ wanted to take him out over the migrant crisis. That's the conspiracy theory of the tinfoil hats. I want to ask a more global picture. If it in fact is related to Turkey, why does Turkey care about the mayoral race in New York City? Is it because the UN is in New York City? I doubt that, because we know from the history of what Azerbaijan and Turkey have done that they were also taking steps in Los Angeles as long ago as 3.5 years ago. You and I have documented that.
Yeah.
They were Mercury Affairs, who was right behind Engine Company in the building behind us. They were co-opting Mercury Affairs. Full disclosure, I was leading a protest against that. They had gotten a contract. Mercury Affairs had with the county here in LA, which is the largest diasporan community in the world for Armenia. And why were they targeting? That was obvious to me. They were targeting here. And they, by the way, it wasn't the first time that Turkey or one of their minions had targeted a diaspora. Remember, Turkish Airlines, when Kobe was alive, had gotten Kobe on board as a spokesperson for Turkish Air, which, by the way, is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Turkish government. Erdogan, who is, fancies himself as the taking over the world, the head of Turkey, wanted to kind of take one of the icons in Los Angeles, which was Kobe, and make him the face of Turkish Airlines. They tried to do the same thing, by the way, with George Clooney. George Clooney turned down the payday.
Yeah, he was going to get $50 million, right, for one spot, and he
an 8-figure amount for one spot to be co-opted. By the way, Amal has represented Armenia in the court of the ICC. And so they thought this was one way to kind of take him and her off the board, so to speak. My conspiracy theory is, no, Turkey thought or was kind of betting on, and they've done this repeatedly for 25 years, that Eric Adams was a potential, that the mayoral position of Eric Adams was not where he ended up, that he had greater aspirations, that he was going to use the mayoral position to, whether it was president or senator or something along those lines, and they wanted to be early money on betting on his career, and to the point where he's now ensnared in this DOJ investigation. Very interesting that DOJ has in New York has focused on Senator Menendez within the last 6 months, and his wife.
That'd be Gold Bar Bobby, right?
What?
That'd be Gold Bar Bobby. Yeah.
And by the way, who was the force behind the recognition of the Armenian genocide also, and nemesis Turkey. So they takes out one of the great voices pro Armenia, anti-Turkey in the U.S. Senate. Now, DOJ, interestingly, is following the opposite or the flip side of that, somebody who's one of the great friends of Turkey, which is Eric Adams. So I guess you could make the argument they're equal opportunity, but it's just interesting that all roads lead to Turkey in many of these cases that the DOJ is involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you're talking about Brianna Suggs, by the way, was the staffer that we referenced earlier who had her home.
Did I pronounce the name right? Suggs?
I believe so.
My SPF failures you point out on a regular basis.
No, that's just a little, a little flopping around. You always get the names right. You just don't always get the order right. But yes, based on my reading of the name and having not heard her say it herself, I would agree that it probably is pronounced Suggs as well. So good job on that one.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time that we live in. And people say, why are you so fixated on Turkey? Well, even if you aren't Armenian and have any belief about or any interest in Armenia, there's a Vivek in a interview, 2 different interviews recently.
I believe he said he's gone on the record and saying it's Vivek. It rhymes with cake.
Vivek. Okay, Vivek. Thank you. Good, Vivek. Vivek has had 2 different interviews recently, and they're interesting on this on the subject of Armenia and Azerbaijan. One, I believe, was with Tucker Carlson. The other one was with it looked up to be a forum of some kind. Why do I say that's interesting? Because when you're analyzing world events, Ukraine, Israel now, the Palestinians, it's a very interesting dynamic if you really want to be intellectually honest about what is happening and where we mobilize our ideology and our kind of war machines.
Would you like to play the Tucker Carlson one?
Yeah, why not? Let's do that.
Yeah, we happen to have
Vivek.
Correct. We have the Vivek Tucker Carlson clip queued up because you asked for it a few weeks ago.
Well, look, I mean, if you want to ask the question of right and wrong, then open that Pandora's box. I don't favor doing this, but look at what's happening with Azerbaijan and Armenia. You don't really hear much about that now. Why? Because Azerbaijan's lobby is about as effective as Ukraine's is in Washington, D.C. So this selective moral outrage, I do think is a problem.
May I ask you to pause for just one moment there and just unpack that for viewers who are not aware of what you're referring to? Armenia, Azerbaijan, what is happening?
Yeah, so, I mean, what's happening is an atrocity. I mean, you have people who are Armenians, largely Christians, six-figure numbers, 120,000, being driven back to their country from a region that has long been a place they have called home. A lot of atrocities that aren't even yet coming to light in Western media. But Azerbaijan has a lobby, a powerful lobby in Washington, D.C. And I think a big part of what's wrong in the United States today, Tucker, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, but it's why I'm coming in as an outsider to this nonsense, is you have a system that is bought and paid for, both for the people who run on the Democratic ticket, people who run on the Republican ticket, and people who make those decisions in Washington, D.C. that are effectively managed by, in this case, the Azerbaijan lobby that has a lid on discussing this conflict, which, as you pointed out, most Americans haven't heard of. But you'll hear endlessly about Russia's incursion on Ukraine and having to stand on the right side. That's a separate point where I reject that Ukraine is inherently good anyway. But even if it were, a selective moral outrage in that case, but not another one in just a neighboring area that interfaces with Russia as well. So open that Pandora's box around the world. I mean, look at much of Africa, look elsewhere. You're going to find ability to have selective moral outrage, but you only hear about it in certain selective cases that the media and the existing establishment in both parties deem fit for the American public.
And he's spot on and that's what you've heard me on my soapbox about this for the last 4 years. I've been dealing with in a variety of areas, this lobby, this Turkish Azerbaijani lobby for 20 years. And it's funded by and controlled by their ability to, at least with Azerbaijan, oil. And if you want to start talking about their relationship with Israel, that's a fascinating subject to go down. But I will point out for anybody who wants to say, how does this affect or where is the connections to all of these world conflicts? Look at the day before Russia invaded Ukraine. You know what Putin did? The day before he invaded Ukraine, he had a meeting, a trilateral meeting with Erdogan and with the dictator of Azerbaijan to sign a trilateral support pact because he knew that was important. And part of this is the flow. Armenia is nettlesome. It's landlocked, but part of that being landlocked is it becomes strategically very important. And you can't talk about these things. You don't have people going, there's the outrage in the legacy media is nowhere to be found. Why? Because the lobby on both sides, what Vivek is just talking about, is so strong, both Democrat and Republican, that you don't hear about this. Armenia is, for those who don't know, the original Christian nation going on 1,700 years ago. So if you were going to talk about where America should stand in solidarity with anybody, somebody who is sandwiched between a country that's sandwiched between Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iran, and Russia, and is a Christian nation, I can't think. You can make all of the arguments you want for these other things that are happening around the world, but there is no more compelling argument if you're being intellectually dishonest or honest and morally consistent than to ask why it is that we are allowing and giving support to Azerbaijan, who just committed the very similar atrocities to what we're seeing in the current situation. And now you've got what's happening here, you're getting it exposed, at least to some degree, as to what's happening. The Menendez case that I just talked about has an argument that is being made by the government that Egypt is trying to co-opt the Menendez's wife, who's by the way, time out, also Armenian. You have the argument with Eric Adams that Turkey and Azerbaijan was trying to infiltrate there. So the bigger macro picture is, why are Turkey and Azerbaijan so involved in these things if there wasn't some other motivation? They weren't sitting here because they were worried about the good government in America.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that your conspiracy theory, for lack of a better term, of them trying to get in and be early money before these politicians end up leapfrogging to higher offices is certainly one that merits consideration. And it seems likely to me.
Well, 20 years ago, I'll tell you that they were funding a then Congresswoman, and I ended up defending in a Ohio Elections Commission matter. And my client's name was Krikorian. Her name was Jean Schmidt. I spent weeks there in Ohio, and the amount of money that was being poured in to her legal defense fund. I think that after that, there was a discussion publicly, and maybe there was some remedial action about her taking money from the Turkish lobbying organization. I've run into this lobbying organization on a variety of cases that I've handled over the years, and it's amazing to me that we not only do we allow it, but we kind of don't talk about it. It doesn't become, it's not the flavor of the week or the flavor of the month when you're talking about what's systemically wrong with the system.
Yeah, you could argue that it's we tacitly encourage it by not bringing it to the forefront.
That's exactly right. Let's segue to one of our other cases. You have some video that queued up or ready on we'll go from the
East Coast to the West Coast.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, this is just B-roll, so I'm going to play it. There's no sound, but what you're looking at.
Why don't you you want to set it up?
Sure.
Because I know that at first when I brought this topic up with you, it wasn't first and foremost in your list of top 10 subjects, and understandably, but I thought this was fascinating, and I'll tell you why on the other side.
Yeah, so we're always fond of covering the exploits of our governor Gavin Newsom, who I think is another person who might have higher political aspirations, and he is formerly the mayor of San Francisco. Famously, he was a big advocate for that city and got a lot of press for some of the stuff that he did there. LGBTQ rights, marijuana legalization, things like that. But since he's gotten to the state house, that city has, largely just gone to hell in a handbasket. There are now apps that track where human feces are in the streets. People are leaving their windows rolled down so that people will rummage through their cars and not break the window because it's getting so expensive every time they get their cars broken into. But coming up, we've got a summit where Chinese President Xi is coming into town. And apparently the city of San Francisco would like to not have the reputation that they so richly have earned. And overnight, as you can see in this video that I'm rolling as B-roll with no sound, they have cleaned up a large portion of the homeless population. And in this video, you can see they've installed these new planters that are, designed to take up the sidewalk space that people had been camping on. And, there are other videos where there are these barricades set up that sort of, block the streets so that you can't cross the street, sort of keeping the sidewalks separate from the streets so that people can't traverse them. And so they have in a very, very short order cleaned up a large portion of the homeless population so that President Xi does not see the kind of, just vagrancy and camping outright on the streets that is just frankly a reality in San Francisco in 2023.
So there will be people who say, "Oh, this is wonderful. Communist California is cleaning up for the head of the party who's coming here." I get that. Okay, I understand what you're saying. I have a more fundamental, because we're nominally at least a legal show, a more kind of a pushback or observation. Part of the argument that you hear from the politicians and those in the community about why they can't take action like they just did here overnight. The argument is that there was a case out of, I believe it was Idaho, and the Ninth Circuit had ruled that these anti-camping ordinances, which are often used in order to, as legal justification, are unconstitutional if there is no place to shelter, in a nutshell. And for some reason, this was never appealed from the Ninth Circuit to the U.S. Supreme Court. There is now another case that is working its way up there. This, I think, shows the complete legal bankruptcy of that position, because clearly you can do it if you have a motivation to do it. Clearly you could clean these areas up if you wanted to. And you know what's ironic about this? And as you know, I've been dealing with the State Bar's executive director, Joe Dunn, for almost a decade. This next year will be 10 years. And he had successfully 10 years ago was trying to sell the State Bar of California's headquarters in San Francisco north of $100 million, because 10 years ago was that kind of shot on the hill. Do you know that announced that they're going out to market on that property, or they entered into some? Do you know what kind of a price they're looking at? They have, by even on the worst case scenario, they have squandered $50 million in equity on the real estate in San Francisco. 5-0, not 1-5, 5-0. And all because the city has become unbelievably just let go of. One of my favorite cities in the world, growing up and in adulthood.
It's absolutely, I couldn't agree more, Mark. It's one of the best cities in the world. I used to visit it frequently because it was so close and it was easy to get to, and it was just so lovely and beautiful. And I cannot imagine taking my young son up there now. I mean, maybe one day, but at the moment, it's just not a place that I would deem safe for my family, maybe for myself, but it's a shame to see what has happened up there.
And there's no reason for it, none whatsoever. As I said, anytime you want to hear somebody invoke that Ninth Circuit case, and I'm sure you'll find it, I would just tell you it's nonsense, because look what they can do when they have the will to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we are dealing with a little bit of a internet connection problem, so I think we might want to pull up a little short here and call it a day. Mark, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it as always. I hope you have a great Sunday, and thank you again, as always, for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. And I don't know if you're making it, but rumor has it that LA Mag's annual food event, if you're watching this on Sunday and it's not quite 2:00 yet, it starts at 2 out at the Hummingbird Nest Ranch.
Yes, it is. And I am still hopeful that I will make it, but we shall see. Mark, if I don't see you there, enjoy yourself. And everyone go to lamag.com for details, and subscribe to the LA Mag YouTube channel, youtube.com/Los Angeles Magazine videos. Thank you so much, Mark. Have a great Sunday.
Thanks, Gary.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.